Hey, what is up? It's your boy, the man, the Riff, the legend, chilling in my pajamas like we always do nowadays. But anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about you and your preparation for the AP Music Theory exam. Today we're going to be looking at some free response question 6. Now, in my last video, we looked at free response question 5, where they gave you the bass notes in the bass clef staff, or the bass staff here, and you had to figure out what Roman numerals to write. But in this particular example, the second of the two examples you'll be given in the first half of the test, they give you the Roman numerals and the figure bass, but not any notes on the staff except for the first chord. So, as you can see, they've given you the key here, G major. We have 1 sharp, so even if you didn't have the key given to you, the rules for finding out the sharp key signature here, you just go up 1 step, half step from the last sharp. In this case, F sharp, up a step, or half step rather, would be G. Okay? So, let's get right down to it. As you can see, I have changed 1 chord here because in the original example, I borrowed this from one of the past AP exams. It is 565 of 2, which we did not get to, and a lot of people didn't get to this year, so they took this off the test. This is called a secondary dominant. In this case, it is an inverted 5 chord, but not in the key of G. It wants you to do a 5 chord in whatever this is. So in this case, 2 in G, 2 is the second degree of the scale, which would be A, up a step. So 5 of A. So if you count it up from A, B, C, D, E, you would end up with an E chord, in this case an E major chord. And you do E7 here with a G sharp and then to 2. So, but they have taken that off the test for this year because a lot of people didn't get to it, my class included. So we're going to change that back to what I did, which is 464, an inverted 4 chord. All right, so let's get right to it. Pick a nice color here. Oh yeah. Oh, that's not it. There we go. Nice cyan. All right, here we go. So, as first thing we have is a 5 chord, 565. So again, if you know your figured bass inversions really well, you'll know that that's a first inversion 5/7 chord. Again, for triads, it'll be nothing and then first inversion, second inversion. First inversion means that the third of the chords is in the bass. Second inversion means that the fifth of the chord is in the bass. Now for the 5/7 chords, you'll see that the nothing will be root position. Then 5/6/5 will be first inversion with the third in the bass. Then it will be 4/3 with the fifth in the bass. And then because you have that fourth note, the seventh of the chord, the last one will be 4/2. Okay, so those are your inversions for 7th chords. And we'll just keep those down there for further reference. So, in this first chord here, a 5 chord in the key of G, if you count up from G, and we'll go ahead and write these out real quick just to make sure that we got G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then we're back to G. So a 5 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is going to be a D chord, and in this case a D7 chord. So the 4 notes that we're going to have, easy way to do it if you don't remember, is once you find the root, since we're dealing with what's called tertian harmony, mostly with music theory, that's harmony at the third. So you just go up in thirds. You got a D chord, so you know it's going to be D, an F of some kind, an A of some kind, and a C of some kind. And like I said, they're not doing any secondary dominant chords, so there should be no weird accidentals unless it's on a minor, in a minor key. If you have the 5 chord, you'll have to put something on the third here. But we're not in a minor key, we're in a major key, so we don't have to worry about any of that. So these are the 4 notes we're dealing with: D, F sharp, A, and C. Okay, but how are we going to put them all out? Let's see what we can do. Okay, so since it's 6/5, the third of the chord, which would be F sharp, has to be in the bass. Now G is right next to F sharp, so it's just asking us to go down one. We wouldn't want to do this, for instance. That would be wrong. They would take off a huge amount of points for that. Well, actually, I think there's 12 points possible for the voice leading, and if there's an uncharacteristic leap in any of the voices, there will be points taken off. So obviously you want to go to this F sharp, the one right next door to it. Okay, and the notes we have left, D, A, and C. So let's see what we can do. Well, D, we have a D, so let's leave that the same. Okay, and the closest thing here would be A, because we can't go to an F sharp here because we would be doubling the leading tone. I mentioned it last video, the leading tone of the scale is going to be the 7th degree, and it has a tendency to resolve upwards to the root, has to do it. And when you're dealing with 5 chords, that's what you're going to see there when they go inevitably to 1. Let's see. And then for C, B to C, easy peasy, just right up a step. Okay, so now we have our first inversion D7 chord, boom, realized. Now it goes back to 1. We could get fancy and make this go upwards to B and create a little line there. But you know what? You're going to be crunched for time. I wouldn't do that. On the AP exam, I would, if it has 1, 5, inverted 5 back to 1, I would go back to exactly the same voicing you had, unless it causes you a problem in some way. So again, I would just copy the same voicing there. And we're back there. Okay, now we're going to the chord that I wrote in, a 4, 6, 4. Okay, well, for our inversions here, a 6, 4 is a second inversion triad. Remember, I put the triads on top here, and then 7th chords are down here. So it means the 5th of the chord is in the bass. Well, let's find out what a 4 chord is. So in the key of G, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to be a C chord of some kind. What notes are in a C chord? Easy peasy. You just find a C, and you go up in thirds. C, skip, skip. And it's either going to be line, 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 or if, for instance, it was a D chord, you go space, space, space. And that's an easy way to visualize the chords really quickly. And since it's 6, 4, the 5th of the chord is in the bass. So remember, this one's called the root, and then you've got the 3rd, and then you've got the 5th on top. So it means the G, the 5th, is going to be in the bass. All right, so take away my scratch work here, and so G is in the bass. It's already on a G, so we just keep it. And then we need a C and an E, or 2 C's rather, and an E, because we want to double the root of the chord. The only time you want to double the 5th of the chord is if you're in like a 1, 6, 4, 5, 1 progression, or 1, 6, 4, 5, any kind of, anything can come after the 5, it doesn't matter. So we've got a G here. Now we have a couple of options. You could jump that up to a C, or you could jump it down to an E. You could skip down to an E or leap up to a C. I'll do it both ways for you to see how you could do that. So the first one I'm going to do is the lesser of the leaps and go down and make it a skip there to E. So then we have C and let's see, we have 2 C's left, right? So easy. These just go out to an octave. And when you're doing this quickly on the test, what a lot of people do to make it easier is when they know it's a C chord, they'll write C, E, G, and or maybe put 2 C's there like that, and then as they put the notes in, they'll mark them off. I've noticed that there's a lot of that going on the sample student responses, especially the ones that are done well. So don't be afraid to do that. No shame in it. And okay, so we've got 2 C's, E, and a G, so we're done with that one. Moving on to a 2 chord. So the 2 chord is going to be 1, 2. So it's going to be A minor. So our two chords are always minor in a major key. And so it's an A minor chord. A root position because there's no figured bass, so A goes in the bass. So we want two A's, a C, and an E. In fact, I'll do what I just told you to do there. I'll put two A's, C, and an E. And if we absolutely had to, we could omit the E and triple the A, or even do two C's if we needed to, but we won't need to do that this time. So we got one done, and see if we have any similar notes. Well, we have two C's. We don't want to do both of them probably, and we have an E. So there's actually a lot of notes in common between a 4 and a 2 chord. There's only one note different actually. So instead of C, E, and G, you have C, E, and A. So I'm going to keep, since we're going to a 1 chord later on, kind of looking ahead, I want my soprano to kind of come down and walk down to a G. So I'm going to jump this down to an A. And then I'm going to keep this one here on a C, and keep this one here on an E. So now I've got A, C, and E. So we're all done up here. Okay, and now we're going to 5-7. So 2-5-1 is an incredibly common chord progression, both classical and jazz. In this case, we have a 5-7 chord. So going back down here, it's kind of the same deal. It's going to be the exact same notes as this one, but it's going to be in root position because that's a, I guess that was somewhat of a misleading when I said earlier that nothing would be root position. Actually, a 7 would be root position. Let me kind of correct this over here in case you want to use it. So for 7th chords, if you see just 7, that means root position. Whereas on a triad, you won't see anything. So root, then first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. Or, sorry, yeah, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. So it'll be a D7 chord, and there. Now, if you went down to D here, they would probably take off points for it being outside of the normal vocal ranges for 4-part harmony. The bass, usually the lowest note that they write in common practice is an E, this E right here. So I wouldn't risk that in case they get mad at you for that. I would jump up to this D right here, just in case. They might not mind, but I'm gonna play it safe, you know. And then so we have D, F sharp, A, and C. And again, if you don't want to write the F sharp or even think about the F sharp in this case, you don't have to because it's in the key signature, so it's not like you're going to have to write it. So if you just want to write D, F, A, C real quick, because you're trying to go for speed, because you only have 25 minutes to do 2 of these. Well, 1 of these and 1 of the free response question 5. So make sure you understand that they're not giving you 25 minutes to do 1 of these and then another 25 minutes to do another 1 of these. What they call question 1, quote unquote, is going to be 1 of the free response 5 and 1 of the free response 6, and that constitutes together question 1, which you get 25 minutes for. So I would plan to spend 10 minutes on each and then 5 minutes to make sure that, you know, everything is submitted properly and there are no technical glitches or anything like that. Okay, so we have D, boink, and we got F sharp, A, and C. Well, we have a C. Let's just keep that one. And then we have an A, so let's keep that one. And then we have F sharp. Alright, so we have D, F sharp, A, C. No problem. And then finally, we're resolving to 1. Now, the only thing you got to worry about in 5 or 5-7 chords is the tendency tones. Now, we already talked about one of them down here. The leading tone always resolves up to the tonic note of the scale, the 1 of the scale, if you will. And then in a 5-7 chord, the 7th degree of the scale, root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, always resolves down by half step to the 3rd degree of the scale. Because it's a half step away from it, and it just doesn't feel right if we don't resolve it that way. So what we're going to do is C already has to go to B, so I'm just going to go ahead and write that in because I know that it has to do it. So we have to work everything else around that. And we know that F sharp has to go to G. So I've resolved my tendency tones. We know the 1 here is root position. We're in the key of G, so it's a G chord. Boom, got to be a G. And then G, G, B. Now we would normally want to have a D because the 3 notes in the chord are a G, B, and D. But in like many situations when you're resolving a 5/7 chord or even a 5 chord to 1, you're not going to have that be able to get all 3 notes in. You might have to triple the root and put the 3rd in there. But the 5th of the chord is the most dispensable. So we're going to put G here because we wouldn't want to jump that up to a D. That would sound very odd. I mean, the melody's kind of coming da da da. We want it to come down and just land on the tonic. So we have G, 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 and a B, and we're good to go. If you had a 5 chord, you'd have 2 Ds, and you could just leave one of them on a D, and you could probably get all 3 notes. But when you have a 5/7, it's somewhat difficult. However, I'm going to show you another way to solve this really quickly that will actually make that possible here. So let's go back and pretend that I did it a little bit differently back here at the 4. And I'm only going to change the inner voices, I think, here. So I'm just going to sort of erase a little bit here. So in the inner voices here, if I decided to, instead of going down, if I wanted to jump this up to a C, which is okay. It's a 4th, but it's not bad. As long as you don't jump a tritone, that's going to be difficult to sing and not very pleasant. So C, E, C, G. Okay, cool. So we've got everything we need there. We're essentially going to kind of swap these 2 voices going forward. So now, instead of keeping the C the same in the alto, we're keeping the C the same in the tenor. And then we have an E up here to keep the same as well. So essentially the same thing we did here with the E, except we're doing it up here in the alto. And then we got F sharp. E is going to F sharp just like we did down here. And C is going to stay on C for the 7th of the D chord. All right, so you've got your 5/7 chord here, D, F sharp, A, C, same as you did. So essentially I just swapped the alto and the tenor voices. Now you're in a situation where you've got the soprano and the alto a step apart here. You could do this, and what that means is essentially you've got the soprano and alto on the same note. I don't think they would get mad at you on the test for that, but they might. It might be a thing where they want 4 separate voices here. So what you could do is you could do that little trick I alluded to last video, where you can drop the leading tone down, because for every rule, of course, there's an exception. You can either go up to that, or if it's in an inner voice, which means alto or tenor, you can drop it down to the 5th of the 1 chord. So in this case, it would be a D, because our chord is spelled GBD. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. So we're going to drop this down to a D. Whoop. And then we got C, and that's going to resolve down by half step, just like I told you up here, to B. Now you have a fully voiced 1 chord. That's pretty much the only way you can get that to work is if you drop the leading tone down a 3rd to the 5th. And as long as another voice is covering that note, you don't have to worry about it. And it has to be in an inner voice. You don't want to do that if the soprano was, say, on an F sharp. You wouldn't want to do that. But if it's in the alto or the tenor, it's completely fine to do that. Okay, so I hope that helped you out on free response question 6. If you have any questions, of course, leave them below or contact me via email or LiveGrades. And in the description, I'll have a similar exercise that I made for you here. It'll be in a minor key, so you'll have to worry about the 7th degree of the scale being raised by a half step. So, and I'll make sure I put the key down here for you, but whatever the 7th degree of the scale is will have to be raised by a half step. So for instance, if this was in two flats, G minor, G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, that is not an E, E flat, F, the for the 5 chord, D, F sharp, A, you would have to sharp that note. So it'll be in harmonic minor, essentially. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching. Again, if you have any questions, contact me. This is Riff, signing off.